The emergency alarm cut through the quiet of the research station like a knife. Dr. Marcus Reed jumped from his chair, his heart racing faster than the blinking red lights that now filled the small room. Outside the reinforced windows, the Martian landscape looked exactly the same, rust-colored rocks and endless dust stretching to the horizon. But something had changed. Marcus knew something was wrong the moment the first signal came through. It wasn't like any transmission they had ever received before. The radio operators had called him immediately, their voices tight with tension. Now, standing in the central command room, he could see why. "Repeat the signal," he ordered. The young technician, Sarah Chen, looked up from her computer. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up the strange transmission again. It was unlike anything in their database, a complex pattern of sounds and electromagnetic waves that seemed to dance between coherence and complete chaos. "It doesn't match any known communication protocol," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see the excitement in her eyes. She was a brilliant young scientist who had been waiting for something extraordinary to happen. The research station had been operational for 3 years, part of humanity's first permanent settlement on Mars. They were supposed to be studying geological formations, searching for signs of ancient water, and preparing the ground for future colonization. Nobody had expected first contact to happen like this. Marcus walked closer to the large screen displaying the signal's breakdown. Mathematical representations of the transmission covered every inch of the display. Some parts looked like mathematical equations, while others resembled complex musical compositions. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Are we certain it's not just interference?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Sarah shook her head. "No, sir. This is definitely a deliberate transmission. Someone, or something, is trying to communicate with us." The implications were enormous. Humanity had long wondered if they were alone in the universe. Countless scientists had sent out radio signals, hoping for a response. Now, unexpectedly, on a small research station on Mars, that response had finally arrived. Marcus pressed a button on the communication console. "I need to speak with Director Harrison immediately." Within minutes, the station's director appeared on the screen. Victor Harrison was a veteran space administrator, someone who had seen almost everything in his decades of service. But even he looked stunned by the information Marcus was sharing. "Keep recording everything," Harrison instructed. "Do not attempt to respond until we understand exactly what we're dealing with." The station came alive with activity. Engineers, mathematicians, linguists, and communication experts were all called in. They worked frantically, trying to make sense of the mysterious transmission. As hours passed, Marcus realized they were witnessing something historic. This was more than just a scientific breakthrough. This was the moment humanity would change forever. Whatever was sending this signal was intelligent, and it had chosen to reach out to them here, on this small research station, millions of miles from Earth. The Martian dust continued to swirl outside, indifferent to the momentous discovery happening inside the station. But inside, everything had changed. First contact was no longer a dream. It was happening right now. 3 days had passed since the first transmission. The Mars Research Station had transformed from a quiet scientific outpost to a buzzing hub of intense activity. Every expert they could contact was working on the mysterious signal, and the pressure was mounting. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in front of her computer, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and scattered notes. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her mind was sharper than ever. The signal was unlike anything she had ever seen. It wasn't just a simple message. It was a complex puzzle that seemed to change every time they thought they understood it. "Look at this," she called to Marcus, pointing at her screen. A series of mathematical patterns danced across the display. "See how these sequences keep shifting? It's like the signal is alive." Marcus leaned closer. He had brought in Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned cryptography expert from Brazil, to help crack the code. Elena studied the screen carefully, her fingers tracing the strange patterns. "It's adaptive. Elena said slowly. The more we try to decode it, the more it changes. This isn't a standard communication method. It's responding to our analysis. The implications were mind-blowing. Whatever was sending this signal was actively watching them, adjusting its message in real time. It was as if the transmission itself was a form of intelligence. Back on Earth, panic was starting to spread. News had leaked about the mysterious signal, and social media was exploding with theories. Some people believed it was an alien invasion, while others thought it was an elaborate scientific hoax. The world's governments were demanding answers. Director Harrison called an emergency meeting. Military representatives, scientists, and government officials joined a secure video conference. Marcus presented their findings, carefully explaining the unique nature of the transmission. "We've never seen anything like this," he explained. "The signal doesn't follow any known communication protocol. It seems to be learning, adapting. Every time we think we've understood a part of it, it changes." A military general leaned forward. "Can it be a threat? Should we prepare defensive measures?" Elena Rodriguez shook her head. "It doesn't show any signs of aggression. If anything, it seems curious, like it's trying to understand us as much as we're trying to understand it." Sarah had been working on a breakthrough. She had noticed a pattern within the chaos of the signal. "Look," she said, pulling up a complex graphic. "These mathematical sequences, they're not random. They're trying to teach us something." The room fell silent. The idea that an alien intelligence might be attempting to communicate and educate was both exciting and terrifying. What could they possibly want to teach humanity? As the discussions continued, Marcus noticed something strange happening on the monitors. The signal was becoming more stable, more focused. It was as if it was waiting for them to pay attention. Suddenly, a new pattern emerged. It wasn't just mathematical equations anymore. Strange visual representations began to appear, complex geometric shapes that seemed to move and change, creating intricate three-dimensional patterns that defied traditional understanding. "It's trying to show us something," Sarah whispered. "Something beyond our current knowledge." The research station held its breath. Whatever was happening, humanity was about to receive a message that would change everything they knew about communication, intelligence, and their place in the universe. The signal continued to pulse, waiting, watching, communicating. Dr. Marcus Reed noticed the first change on a quiet Tuesday morning. It started with Sarah Chen's computer. A strange shimmer passed across its screen, like a heat wave made of light. At first, he thought it was just another technical glitch. But then it happened again. "Sarah," he called out, "are you seeing this?" Sarah looked up from her workstation. Her eyes widened. The geometric patterns from the alien signal were no longer just images on a screen. They seemed to be moving, breathing, almost alive. The complex shapes began to pulse with a soft, blue-green light that filled the entire research station. "It's changing," she whispered. "The signal is doing something." Within minutes, every electronic device in the station started to react. Computers began to display intricate patterns that looked like a cross between mathematical equations and living organisms. The station's communication systems buzzed with a sound that was neither mechanical nor natural, something in between. Director Harrison's voice crackled over the intercom. "Everyone stay calm. Do not disconnect any equipment." But calm was the last thing anyone felt. The alien signal was transforming their technology before their eyes. Screens showed impossible geometries, mathematical equations that seemed to solve themselves, complex diagrams that looked like blueprints for technologies humanity had never imagined. Dr. Elena Rodriguez noticed something even more strange. The signal wasn't just changing their computers, it was changing them. Workers around her began to experience subtle shifts in perception. Colors seemed brighter. Sounds became more detailed. Their minds felt sharper, more connected. "It's a form of communication beyond language," Elena said to Marcus. "The signal is teaching us something directly into our brains." Outside the research station, the Martian landscape began to change as well. Robotic exploration vehicles started moving differently, their programming subtly altered by the alien transmission. They began to collect data in ways no human had programmed them to do. Sarah's hands moved across her keyboard with impossible speed. She was solving complex mathematical problems without consciously thinking about them. Equations that would have taken months of calculation were resolving themselves in seconds. "This isn't just a message," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's a transformation." Government officials on Earth were losing their minds. Military leaders demanded shutdown protocols. Scientific advisors argued for continued observation. The world watched as the Mars research station became something entirely new and unknown. Marcus walked to the station's main window. The Martian landscape looked the same, but everything felt different. The alien signal had turned their research station into something between a scientific facility and a living organism of knowledge. "What are you trying to tell us?" he whispered to the signal. As if in response, a new pattern emerged. It wasn't just mathematical or visual anymore. It was a complex language that seemed to exist between thought and communication. Fragments of understanding began to flood the researchers' minds, glimpses of technologies, scientific principles, and ways of thinking that were completely alien to human understanding. The transformation was happening. Humanity was being offered something beyond communication. It was being offered evolution. And nobody knew exactly what would happen next. News traveled fast. Within hours of the strange events at the Mars research station, the entire world was on high alert. Every government, scientific institution, and military organization was scrambling to understand what was happening. Dr. Marcus Reed found himself in a secure video conference with leaders from around the globe. His image was projected onto massive screens in situation rooms from Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to New Delhi. He looked tired but excited, his eyes reflecting something more than just scientific curiosity. "The signal is not an invasion," Marcus explained carefully. "It's more like an invitation." Military leaders looked skeptical. A general from the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff leaned forward. An invitation to what? Before Marcus could answer, Sarah Chen appeared on a smaller screen next to him. Her appearance had subtly changed. Her eyes seemed brighter, more focused. When she spoke, her voice carried a calm certainty that was new. "To evolve," Sarah said simply. "The signal is showing us how to expand our understanding of technology, biology, and communication." Around the world, similar transformations were happening. Research stations, universities, and scientific facilities that had been studying the original Mars transmission began experiencing strange phenomena. Computers started solving previously impossible problems. Scientists found themselves understanding complex theories with sudden, shocking clarity. In a lab in Japan, a team of researchers discovered they could now understand mathematical concepts that had previously seemed incomprehensible. In a university in Brazil, students working on quantum physics began seeing patterns in the universe that defied previous scientific understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was monitoring global communications. "It's spreading," she told Marcus. "The signal isn't just talking to us, it's changing us." The world was split between fear and excitement. Social media exploded with theories. Some people believed it was the end of humanity. Others saw it as the greatest opportunity in human history. Religious leaders debated the theological implications. Philosophers argued about the nature of consciousness and evolution. Director Harrison entered the conference room with a stack of reports. "We're seeing unprecedented changes," he said. "Our technology is advancing at a rate we've never seen before. The signal is teaching us something fundamental about the universe." Marcus looked at the screens showing research stations around the world. The signal was transforming everything it touched. Computers were becoming more than just machines. Scientific understanding was expanding at an exponential rate. "We're not being conquered," Marcus realized out loud. "We're being invited to become something more." The global leaders fell silent. The implications were massive. This wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was a fundamental shift in human potential. Sarah Chen's voice cut through the silence. "We have a choice," she said. "We can resist or we can embrace this transformation." Outside the conference room, the world continued to change. Technologies that had seemed like science fiction were becoming reality. Humanity stood at the edge of something extraordinary, a potential leap in evolution that no one could fully understand. The signal continued to pulse, waiting, watching, offering humanity a chance to become something entirely new. Dr. Marcus Reed stood in the center of what used to be the Mars Research Station's main laboratory. Nothing looked the same anymore. The walls seemed to breathe with an inner light, and the equipment had transformed beyond recognition. Devices that once required massive computer systems now fit into small, intricate devices that looked more like living organisms than machines. Sarah Chen walked in, her movements different from before. She moved with a grace and purpose that seemed almost supernatural. "We found something," she said, her voice calm and clear. The signal had been teaching them, not just giving information, but fundamentally changing how humans understood the universe. What had started as a mysterious transmission was now revealing secrets that would have taken centuries to discover. "Show me," Marcus replied. Sarah brought up a holographic display that seemed to float in the middle of the room. It wasn't a screen like before. This was something alive, a three-dimensional representation of scientific knowledge that moved and shifted like a living thing. "The signal is more than communication," Sarah explained. "It's a key to understanding the fundamental nature of reality." Marcus watched as complex mathematical equations danced around them. They showed connections between physics, biology, and technology that no human had ever imagined before. The universe was suddenly more interconnected than anyone had ever believed possible. Outside the station, Mars itself seemed to be changing. Robotic exploration vehicles were now moving with an intelligence that went beyond their original programming. They were collecting data, making discoveries, solving problems in ways no human engineer could have designed. Dr. Elena Rodriguez entered the room, holding a tablet that glowed with an unusual light. "The global scientific community is in shock," she said. "We're solving problems that have stumped us for generations. Cancer research, climate change, quantum computing. Everything is advancing at an impossible rate." The transformation wasn't just technological. People around the world were changing. Scientists were experiencing heightened cognitive abilities. Complex problems that once took years to solve were now being resolved in hours. It was as if the entire human species was being upgraded. "What do you think they want?" Marcus asked, looking at the holographic display. Sarah's response was immediate. Not control. Communication. Understanding. The signal had chosen humanity for a reason. It wasn't conquering or destroying. It was teaching, guiding, showing them a path to a new level of existence. Military leaders and government officials were losing their grip on control. Traditional power structures were breaking down as scientific understanding rapidly expanded. The world was changing faster than anyone could have imagined. "We're being invited to join something bigger," Elena said, her eyes reflecting the dancing holographic equations. "A universal network of knowledge." Marcus looked out the window at the Martian landscape. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same anymore. Humanity stood at the edge of a transformation that would change everything they knew about themselves and the universe. The signal continued to pulse, watching, waiting, offering humanity a chance to become something more than they had ever imagined possible. Outside, the first modified exploration vehicles began to move across the Martian surface. They were no longer just machines. They were something new, something alive with potential. The transformation was just beginning. The world had changed more in the past week than in the previous 100 years. Dr. Marcus Reed watched as humanity teetered on the edge of something unprecedented. The alien signal had transformed everything: technology, understanding, even human potential. Military bases around the world were in chaos. Sophisticated weapon systems were becoming sentient, not in a threatening way, but in a manner that seemed to reject conflict altogether. Soldiers reported strange experiences, a sudden understanding that violence was no longer a solution to anything. Sarah Chen stood beside Marcus, her enhanced perception taking in details that would have been invisible before. "We're approaching a critical moment," she said quietly. "The signal is preparing us for something bigger." Global communication networks had become something entirely new. Information flowed differently now. It wasn't just about sending data, it was about sharing understanding. Countries that had been enemies for generations suddenly found themselves seeing the world through a shared perspective. In a research facility in Switzerland, scientists discovered they could now understand complex quantum theories that had been impossible to comprehend before. Mathematical models that once took years to develop were now emerging in minutes. The human brain seemed to be rewiring itself, becoming something more than it had ever been. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was monitoring global communications. "It's like we're being prepared," she told Marcus. "The signal is teaching us, but it's also testing us." Governments were losing their grip on control. Traditional power structures were crumbling. People were becoming more connected, more understanding. Conflicts that had seemed impossible to resolve were now being solved through a new kind of communication. The Mars Research Station had become the center of this transformation. What was once a simple scientific outpost was now something between a technological marvel and a living organism of knowledge. The walls seemed to pulse with an inner light, and the equipment had become more like living things than machines. "We're being offered a choice," Sarah explained. "Either evolve or remain stuck in our old ways of thinking." Marcus looked out at the Martian landscape. The exploration vehicles were moving with an intelligence that went beyond their original programming. They were collecting data, making discoveries, solving problems in ways no human engineer could have designed. Suddenly, a new pattern emerged in the signal. It wasn't just mathematical equations or visual representations anymore. It was something more, a complex language that existed between thought and communication. Fragments of understanding began to flood the researchers' minds. "It's showing us our potential," Elena said, her eyes wide with understanding. "We're not just being changed. We're being invited to become something more." The world watched and waited. Some people were terrified. Others were excited. But everyone could feel that something fundamental was changing. Humanity was being offered a chance to transcend its current limitations. Military leaders found their weapons becoming useless. Economic systems were transforming. The very way humans thought about existence was shifting. "We're at a turning point," Marcus said quietly. "Everything we know is about to change." The signal continued to pulse, watching, waiting, offering humanity a chance to become something entirely new. Outside the research station, the first modified exploration vehicles moved across the Martian surface. They were no longer just machines. They were something alive with potential, a symbol of humanity's transformation. The point of no return had arrived. Dr. Marcus Reed understood now. The moment had arrived. The final transformation humanity had been prepared for. The Mars Research Station glowed with an inner light that seemed to pulse with life, with purpose, with understanding. Sarah Chen stood beside him, no longer just a scientist, but something more. Her eyes reflected a knowledge that went beyond human comprehension. "We're ready," she said simply. The entire world had changed. The alien signal had been more than just a message. It had been a process of awakening, of preparing humanity for something greater than anyone could have imagined. Around the globe, people experienced a simultaneous moment of clarity. Conflicts disappeared. Boundaries dissolved. The human mind expanded beyond its previous limitations. Scientists, politicians, workers, children, everyone felt the same thing. A connection. An understanding that went deeper than words. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched as the global communication networks transformed. They were no longer just systems of information exchange. They had become living networks of shared consciousness. Countries that had been enemies now saw their shared humanity. Economic systems that had been built on competition now understood the power of collaboration. The exploration vehicles on Mars began to move in a synchronized dance. They were no longer machines controlled by humans. They were extensions of a larger, more complex intelligence. The Martian landscape itself seemed to come alive, revealing secrets that had been hidden for millions of years. "We're being invited to join something bigger," Marcus whispered. The signal reached its final stage. It was no longer just a transmission. It was a bridge, a connection to something vast and incomprehensible. Humanity was being offered a chance to expand beyond its current form of existence. Governments collapsed, not through violence, but through understanding. Military systems became obsolete. Economic structures transformed. The very concept of human limitation began to dissolve. Sarah explained what was happening. "We're not being conquered," she said. "We're being invited to evolve." The Mars research station began to change. Its walls became transparent, then translucent, then something that defied description. It was becoming a gateway, a point of transition between what humanity was and what it could become. Marcus felt the transformation happening to his own body. It wasn't painful. It was like waking up from a long sleep. His perception expanded. He could see connections that had always existed but were never visible before. Around the world, people experienced the same thing. A sudden understanding. A connection to something larger than themselves. The boundaries between individual humans began to blur. Not in a way that destroyed individuality, but in a way that showed how deeply connected they truly were. The alien signal had been an invitation, a chance to become something more. As the transformation reached its peak, Marcus looked at Sarah. She was no longer just a human. Neither was he. They had become something else, something that could understand the universe in ways they never could before. "We're ready," Sarah said again. The Mars research station began to glow. The entire planet seemed to pulse with a new kind of energy. Humanity was changing, evolving, becoming something entirely new. The first step into a larger universe had begun.